Good afternoon, everyone. I think we can start. I want to welcome everyone joining this webinar today. For those of you who may be new to these webinars, my name is Michelle Funk, and I head the Policy Law and Human Rights Unit in the Department of Mental Health at the World Health Organization in Geneva. This Quality Rights webinar is the fourth in our series on creating mental health systems and services that do not use coercive practices and that promote a rights-based recovery approach. Today's webinar is going to focus on supported decision-making in practice. Supported decision-making is essential for ensuring that people can make their own choices regarding all aspects of their lives, including, crucially, the mental health care that they receive. This approach acknowledges that every individual is unique with unique support needs. It also recognizes that everyone may require different levels and types of support to make decisions and choices at different times in their life. It challenges as well the current paternalistic approach based on guardianship and best interests and moves towards approaches that recognize people's right to autonomy, self-determination, and control over their lives. In this webinar, we'll delve into how supported decision-making operates and can be successfully implemented in practice, spotlighting the work of Support Girona, an organization offering this crucial support to Catalonia's citizens. Through first-hand accounts, we'll learn how people are accessing necessary services and supports, thus reclaiming their autonomy and control over their lives. We encourage everyone to share their thoughts, experiences, and questions. We aim for an interactive and dynamic discussion. We also encourage everyone to complete the WHO QualityRights training, which provides the foundation for understanding and establishing recovery-oriented approaches and supported decision-making in mental health. The link to the QualityRights training is in the chat. You'll also find a range of other practical resources and training materials that go into depth on supported decision-making. I'd like to thank our moderator and our speakers for being with us here today and to share their experience and expertise. We are pleased to bring this webinar to you both in English and Spanish, and I would like to say a big thank you to colleagues from SOM Salut Mental 360 for organizing this webinar. Thank you so much. In order to access interpretation, you can go to the bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen where you'll see the interpretation button. It's the one with the icon of a globe. Once you're there, you can select which language you want to listen to. I would now like to welcome Magda Casamitjana, who is a critical collaborator responsible for introducing and implementing quality rights in Catalonia. Magda is the director of the National Pacte on Mental Health for the Catalonian government. The Pact unites government departments and civil society actors to implement a human rights-centered strategy across society. Magda has also been instrumental in introducing the Quality Rights Initiative to Catalonia in order to build capacity, implement good practices, and transform mental health and social services. Over to you, Magda.
Muchísimas gracias, Michelle, y muy bienvenidos. Buenas tardes. ¿Cuál es la importancia de poner en marcha la planificación de decisiones anticipadas y su implementación en Cataluña? Estamos convencidos en Cataluña de que la planificación de decisiones anticipadas refuerza mucho el proceso relacional y de diálogo entre profesionales y personas usuarias de los servicios de salud mental. Para ello, desde Cataluña queremos introducir el uso de la planificación de decisiones anticipadas en el ámbito de la salud mental porque genera oportunidades en la mejora de la calidad de vida de las personas, promueve el desarrollo y facilita la relación de confianza y diálogo de esta con el equipo profesional, convirtiendo a la persona en un agente activo e imprescindible. Además, favorece la autonomía y el empoderamiento de la persona en la toma propia de decisiones respecto a su salud. y, como consecuencia, la alianza entre las diferentes partes implicadas en la prevención de posibles recaídas. En Cataluña estamos viendo que la toma de decisiones con acompañamiento o apoyo permite que se establezca este vínculo del que hablaba, esta confianza mutua entre la persona y el profesional, y es mayor y, por lo tanto, estamos decididos a implementarlo en toda Cataluña. Para consolidar los quality rights, es necesario implementar primero también la planificación de decisiones anticipadas en los servicios, tanto en los servicios de salud como en los servicios residenciales y, sobre todo, también en las prisiones. La planificación de decisiones anticipadas mediante un proceso deliberativo y estructurado tiene presente y en cuenta los valores y preferencias de la persona, expresando cómo quiere que sea su atención en momentos de hospitalización o en estancias en servicios de salud o, como decía antes, residenciales o penitenciarios. Y además permite identificar signos de alerta como los síntomas y expresar actuaciones que ayudan o no ayudan a que la persona se sienta mejor. El modelo de la planificación de decisiones anticipadas sirve para promover y garantizar la capacidad de autodeterminación de la persona en condiciones de estabilidad clínica, incluso en la misma crisis. Es esencial la sensibilización y concienciación de todos los profesionales sobre las ventajas y las limitaciones en relación con las expectativas de la planificación de decisiones anticipadas, así como la implicación de todos los agentes para diseñar acciones futuras que introduzca esta planificación, no solo como herramienta, sino como cambio de mentalidad y de filosofía. En Cataluña estamos desarrollando la formación específica que tendrán que tener todos los profesionales de apoyo a las personas para redactar su PDA. Y también hemos empezado a implementar la planificación de decisiones anticipadas con algún proveedor de la salud mental. Por lo tanto, la planificación de decisiones anticipadas y la implementación de todos los quality rights en salud mental es un claro indicador del cambio de paradigma en el modelo asistencial que queremos seguir desde Cataluña. Por lo tanto, convencidos de la fuerza de la iniciativa por los derechos humanos de calidad y de la Organización Mundial de la Salud, los Quality Rights, para consolidar el cambio de paradigma en nuestro país. Para ello, y termino, hemos firmado un convenio con la Organización Mundial de la Salud, a quien agradezco mucho a Miquel Fang que nos lo proporcionara, que nos ayuda a implementar todos los quality rights en todas las políticas y todas las acciones que el Gobierno puede hacer para la salud mental. Esta iniciativa nos proporciona las herramientas necesarias y prácticas y el desarrollo de las capacidades necesarias para implementar este enfoque de decisiones de apoyo en los servicios de salud mental. En estos momentos estamos ya consolidando la planificación de decisiones anticipadas, los peers, peers-to-peers, de apoyo entre iguales, y la eliminación de contenciones mecánicas en los recursos de salud mental, residencias y prisiones, y hemos empezado ya a formar a toda la ciudadanía en los quality rights. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Magda. Personally, we have really appreciated your support and also that, of course, of your government. I think what is really important to emphasize is that the experiences of Catalonia, the whole process you're going through, the outcomes are going to go a long way towards informing the actions of other countries, and that is just so valuable. So let me now hand over to Jared Klein, who will be moderating our webinar today. Jared is the Deputy Executive Director of the International Disability Alliance. He is a lawyer, former diplomat, and someone who was institutionalized on the basis of a psychosocial disability before the CRPD entered into force. So over to you, Jared. Thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this session.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And just at the outset, I'll just remind everyone of the interpretation in case that wasn't previously able to be accessed. The globe icon down the bottom, and you can select your preferred language. And also, please do feel free to raise hands in the chat in the discussion portion later on. That's how we will moderate the more interactive section of this important webinar. So before introducing the panelists, I just want to say from the perspective of the International Disability Alliance and for myself personally that the increasing trend and promotion of good practices in relation to supported decision-making are an essential step forward in the realization of the right to legal capacity and equal personhood of all persons worldwide. It goes to fundamental matters of choice and informed consent, particularly in relation to the area of mental health, where unfortunately, historically, these rights have been significantly curtailed or violated. It is, I think we can all understand that we want the right to decide for ourselves over our own bodies and secure our own mental and physical integrity. But we also know that in many contexts around the world today, perhaps even in all contexts, this is not a reality for many people. So in that sense, this webinar is very important to show exactly how supported decision-making can and is being increased in many contexts, and we look forward to hearing from the panelists today. Firstly, we have Michael Njenga. He works for CBM Global as the Regional Mental Health Advisor for Africa. Michael Njenga also identifies as a person with a psychosocial disability. So I'll first hand over to him to explain supported decision-making in clear and concrete terms, showing the importance of the concept as well as its practical reality. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gerald and colleagues, for the invitation to share some reflection and knowledge about supported decision-making. I guess sometimes when we talked about supported decision-making, we think it's about persons with disability. But I think in all our lives, when you're making decisions, we rely on the support of other people to be able to make those particular decisions. So I don't think the whole discussion around supported decision-making, it's about persons with disability. It's basically a recognition that this historically is a group which have been, for example, denied the right to make your own decisions and to have those decisions respected by others. So just to say a couple of few things about supported decision-making is, I think, one thing which is very integral as part of being a human being or a person is there's the right to make one's own decisions and to have those decisions respected by others. And it is extremely difficult to build inclusive societies for all if we do not allow persons with disabilities, specifically persons with intellectual disabilities, persons with psychosocial disabilities and other cognitive disabilities to make decisions in relation to the most important matters affecting their lives. How can persons with psychosocial, intellectual, and cognitive disabilities be part of our communities and meaningfully contribute towards the development of our societies if they do not enjoy and exercise the right to make their own decisions on an equal basis with others? While it is important also to recognize that in some cases, we are not denying that they might experience difficulties in decision-making, and consequently, they might require support, just like anyone else. And this does not mean then we should take away their right to decision-making, but we should adopt a paradigm shift from substituted decision-making to supported decision-making. So why is supported decision-making important? So supported decision-making helps in advancing a view of autonomy and decision-making. It has many benefits, and this goes, of course, beyond the medical field to persons with disability, as it can be a very important tool during emergency decision-making moments. It is an integral part of recovery-based services and a source of valuable information about an extensive range of issues, enabling persons with disabilities to make informed decisions. This then imposes a positive duty on state to put all appropriate and positive measures to ensure that all barriers to decision-making are removed and appropriate support measures are put into place for people with disabilities to fully exercise and enjoy their right to legal capacity. Just like everyone else, persons with disabilities must also be allowed to take the dignity of risk, because I think more than often the argument is, of course, that, for example, persons with psychosocial disability will make a mistake. They will make the wrong decision, which all of us do in our life. And I think for me, allowing them that dignity of risk is an opportunity for them to make mistakes and also to learn from those particular mistakes, which for me is basically being part of humanity and human diversity. It is important to recognize that support must be provided irrespective of the nature or the effects of the disability and apparent need for support. That should not preclude any person with a disability from accessing support when they require support in the whole process of decision-making. The paradigm shift in supported decision-making means then that the development of a relation and the ways of working together to make it possible for a person to express him or herself and communicate his or her wishes under an understanding of trust and respect for the person's will and preference. And I think it is important to recognize that the overarching principle in decision-making, of course, respecting a person's will and preference, but then this needs to be built on mutual understanding and also on the principles of trust and mutuality. Different types of support should be promoted and encouraged to meet the wide range of needs among people with disabilities and allow for personal choice among different options. And I think this is in appreciation of human diversity, that even as persons with disabilities, we are not a homogeneous group and we have different kind of support needs. So some of the types of the support needs, for example, depending in different contexts, could include support networks, it could be circles of friends, it could be personal ombudsman, it could be about community services. What social capital do we have within our communities that, for example, can be transformed, capacitated, and trained to provide support services for persons with disabilities within a human right framework in consistency, of course, with the WHO Quality Rights and also the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I think most importantly, we cannot forget about the role of peer support, personal assistance, and also the need to think about advanced planning. How do we think about crisis, and how do we help people to make decisions well in advance instead of waiting into a situation where we need to go and de-escalate probably a particular situation. And I think finally, there are certain important considerations when you're thinking about the provision of support. And this is age. It needs to be age appropriate, gender sensitive. It needs, of course, to look into the cultural and religious preferences. Those are the very, very, very important factors to consider depending from one context to another. But I think, as I've said, for me, what takes preeminence in the paradigm shift from substituted decision-making to supported decision-making is respecting the will and preference of a particular person. Thank you very much, and over back to you, Gerald.
Thank you very much, Michael, and really important points on how to move from substituted decision-making to supported decision-making and recognizing the individualized nature of that support. I would like to now introduce a representative from Support Girona. Mr. Ferran Blanco has been with Support Girona since 2014, and Support Girona is an NGO dedicated to promoting the rights of persons with disabilities. Ferran is currently the head of projects and innovation, and he also collaborates with Mental Health Europe and the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities. During his academic career, his research focus has included legal capacity, supported decision-making, and transitioning from coercive measures to community-based support. So I'll now hand over to Ferran to introduce the work of Support Girona in the context of this theme. Thank you, Ferran.
Thank you, Jared, for the introduction, and thank you, the organizers, for supporting us to participate in this webinar. Indeed, I will try to explain a little bit Support Girona. Support Girona is an organization with 20 years of history, located in the northeast of Catalonia, and it's a non-for-profit organization which currently develops and provides support decision-making services to any person who might need it. Our user base is comprised of 70% of persons with psychosocial disabilities, 20% of persons with intellectual disabilities, and also persons with cognitive impairment or some type of dementia from the natural aging process. Currently, we support more than 1,300 persons, and we do so under the particular and legal framework that the Catalan Civil Code provides. That it's different from the Spanish one. And I need to say that it's about support decision-making, and we have been mentioning legal capacity. Legal capacity, perhaps, it's a more legalistic approach on support decision-making, and support decision-making is more the practical approach in relation to how we deliver the service, how we provide this support to the persons that have a formal link with the organization. In Spain and in Catalonia, the legal framework changed in 2021, and the main instrument that we use now in Catalonia is the assistance. The assistance is a mechanism that it's a voluntary mechanism. So the person needs to ask for the support in front of a court or in front of a notary in order to be able to receive the support from us as an organization. Another particularity that we have in Support Girona as a service provider is that we are considered a specialized global service included in the portfolio of social service, which gives us kind of like a universal scope to our service, because it's a service that is guaranteed by the public administration, and we have stable funding to provide that service. We at Support Girona, we are 125 professionals in the different areas, the legal department, the financial department, but the majority of our professionals work in the person-centered area, the social area, which means that we are mainly social workers, as myself, social educators, psychologists, or some occupational therapists. That means that we provide very flexible support, very individualized support to persons in the community, but we can also have resources from our legal department, from lawyers, and from financial technicians also to manage more complex issues in relation to, for example, inheritance or real estate or the financial matters of the person. But this is not about Support Girona, and this is not about the legal framework, which is recently renewed in 21. It's about the experience, how we deliver this service in practice. And for that, we have been preparing 2 videos showcasing 2 direct testimonies of our work. And I will try to contextualize them a little bit before playing the videos. The first testimony that we will hear about, it's a guy named Fadil, a 25-year-old man, which comes from a Moroccan family where his father, was living in a city with one family, but it turns out that he had another family in Morocco, so two families, and in the process of regrouping the family in Catalonia, which was successful, started the conflictivity around Fadil. Fadil has 4 brothers and two half brothers, and since very early ages, he has been diagnosed with a psychosocial disability and a learning and development disability. And currently he has a disability degree of 45%, which is not important for us to provide the support, but it's important to access certain benefits on the welfare state or certain services that might need this diagnosis requirement or the disability certificate. Fadil started using drugs from a very early age, and considering the situation with the family, the conflicts around, constantly fighting with their parents, the situation was unmanageable to the point that the public administration had to intervene when he was a minor. Fadil spent from 16 years old to 18 years old under the supervision of the administration as he was a minor, and spent 2 years in a educational and residential center for minors of the public government. And when he turned out 18 years old, he requested the support of Fundació Support Girona, mainly because the substance abuse, the conflictivity around, and the impossibility to live with the family was a reality. And this is mainly the situation of Fadil. We will see the video in a minute, and then we will comment on the work that we have been doing with Fadil and the outcomes of our support. And the other testimony, it's a 45-year-old man, also with a complex family situation. He's the middle of 9 brothers, with the particularity that he had to experience the death of a brother by an overdose. He had to experience also the death of another brother by suicide. And it was at that point where he started using marijuana, he started doing cocaine, he started using also heroin. And you can imagine that the situation was not manageable because the conflictivity around, the fact that he has also a psychosocial disability diagnosed by schizophrenia with several episodes of psychotic crisis, combined with the substance abuse, doesn't help the situation. He also has been married with a woman that also died, and on that marriage he has one son that, as he was not exercising the role of a father, he was not able to see for a long time. We will talk about what's the situation on this later. But both of them came to the support using the assistance as a legal mechanism, requesting that we help them in financial issues, in personal issues, in health-related issues. And I will share the videos now, and then we will comment a little bit. I will start with Fadil.
Jo sóc en Fadil, tinc 23 anys, sóc futbolista, amant de la música i fanàtic de moltes coses que m'agraden i m'ajuden a sobreviure, i tinc dificultats. He jugat a futbol quasi tota la vida, he estat de ben petitó, quan vaig aprendre a caminar, he començat a jugar a futbol fins avui, als 23 anys. Però amb la droga ja era molt complicat. Amb la droga que me cansava, és el que t'ha dit. Jo sortia per les nits cada nit sortia al carrer a fumar porros, a beure alcohol, i això no el deixaria fer a ningú, això de fumar drogues, no és un bon consell.
El motiu pel qual en Fadil entra a Fundació Support Girona és perquè sortint d'un CRAE torna a viure amb la família i hi ha diferents problemes en la relació familiar i a partir d'aquí es creu que dins del perfil que té en Fadil és adient que tingui un acompanyament.
Ai, la Júlia. És una bona amistat, és molt bona persona i que segueixi així.
En Fadil té una assistència representativa en mans de la Fundació Support Girona i arrel d'aquí s'ha anat vinculant a diferents serveis, com el Centre de Salut Mental per Adults, el Centre d'Atenció a la Drogodependència, a l'hospital quan ha passat per patologia dual i molts altres serveis que l'abarquen, que l'ajuden i que l'acompanyen, igual que nosaltres. El pas més important és que hi hagi un bon vincle amb la Fundació i a partir d'aquí que en Fadil tingui clar que nosaltres el que volem és ajudar i que pugui estar més bé o que pugui tenir una vida molt més saludable per ell, tant física com mental. I a partir del vincle vas creant com una situació, un entorn més còmode i es donen diferents opcions. I allà és on ell pot començar a triar. Evidentment, es fan passos endavant, se'n fan endarrere i així es anar fent. El rol de la Fundació és bàsicament acompanyar-lo en les seves decisions. Nosaltres li donem opcions i per als nostres coneixements o per coordinació amb serveis li podem donar diferents camins, però sempre serà la seva decisió i el que ell vulgui fer.
Al fin i al cap acabes aprenent l'elecció. Quan veus tu que has deixat de fumar i estàs jugant a futbol, aprens l'elecció. Dius, mira que bé ara. Home, ara jo estic millor que abans i molt millor que mai perquè he notat que el camí de la droga no em funciona, però ara estic en abstinència i estic recuperant-me. Estic com molt millor reflexionat de l'àmbit. He canviat d'hàbit, he canviat d'àmbit i em trobo molt millor que abans.
En Fadil, motivat, reflexiu i crec que té la capacitat d'evolucionar.
Gran, no sé, treballador, ser un senyor gran que li agrada treballar, que pensa en bones idees i que estigui bé treballant, que em senti bé a un lloc que em senti bé a mi treballar.
Crec que si s'ho proposa i si ho vol pot fer el que vulgui. I mica en mica el veiem fins i tot més feliç.
Yes, this is a testimony of Fadil and Julia. And then...
Pues mira, cuando yo era pequeño me quemé con fuego por jugar con la bombona. Estuve 3 meses en coma. Cuando me hice grande probé los porros y a raíz de eso consumí heroína después. Después conocí a Victoria, me quitó de la heroína y estuvimos juntos 9 años. Murió ella de cáncer de ovario, me enganché después a la cocaína y al alcohol. Mi vida era fatal, mi vida siempre era consumo y consumo. No, era un pozo sin salida. Pero hoy por hoy, perfecto, todo. Me están operando, me ayudan los médicos, la fundación me lleva, me traen, se preocupan mucho, me ayudan a quitarme de la droga, me ayudan a hacer el piso, me ayudan es que en todo, es que no tengo palabras, porque me ayudan tanto, no hay palabras para eso.
En Paco compta amb una assistència simple, que això implica que ell té la plena capacitat per decidir què vol fer i què no, però sí que precisa d'un suport per acabar d'entendre algunes qüestions del seu dia a dia o a l'hora de fer alguns tràmits. I la Fundació Support Girona s'encarrega de donar-li i oferir-li aquest suport per acabar d'entendre i poder decidir lliurement i tenint tota la informació. Sobretot nosaltres ens centrem en les àrees mèdica i econòmica, que és on en Paco ha necessitat més suport, perquè ell fa seguiment a diversos serveis, com seria la xarxa de salut mental i el centre de drogodependències, i li hem donat aquest suport per poder assistir a les visites i poder explicar ben bé què és el que ha necessitat en cada moment. I en la gestió econòmica ens centrem ben bé en ajudar-lo a decidir si allò en el que vol invertir els seus diners és una necessitat o no ho és.
Uy, no sé dónde estaría. Igual podría estar muerto, o viviendo en la calle, o no sé. Gracias a ello tengo una vida de calidad.
Al final la nostra feina es basa en establir una relació de confiança, establir un vincle amb aquella persona. Si no, poca cosa hi haurà a fer, perquè la persona, si no confia en tu i en el que li estàs recomanant o allò que li estàs dient que creus que és el millor per ell, no aniràs enlloc.
Me gusta la vida que tengo ahora, que es más sana. No tomo droga, no bebo, no hago nada ya. Y están contentos conmigo porque ya he dado un paso adelante muy bueno. He dejado todo, todas sustancias de drogas. Gracias a la fundación. Y he puesto de mi parte, claro.
Els èxits no són de la fundació, sinó que són de la pròpia persona. Quan en Paco refereix a que la fundació, gràcies a la fundació, ell ha arribat a deixar de consumir o que li donem suport en això, la realitat és que nosaltres simplement l'acompanyem a les visites mèdiques i l'apoderem a que ho arribi a aconseguir i cregui en ell. Però l'èxit és seu, perquè qui arriba a deixar de consumir és ell, i sense el seu esforç no es faria. Per tant, estem molt orgullosos del seu procés.
So let me just say a little, contextualize a little bit more about the outcomes of both the testimonies. In the second video, you can see that the person has a very evident problem, an aesthetic problem with the face, and that was one of the first demands that he expressed to us, he manifested to us, because it was complicated for him to know the avenues, the routes, to be able to help him with the burn, with the fire marks that it has on the face. And aside from doing all the instrumental things of securing a place to live, helping the person have a financial stable situation, activating benefits and joining them to visits, one of the first things that we always do is try to find out what the person really wants. In the case of Paco, the second video, the fact that he has these visible marks in the face due to the incident when he was young was one of the main worries, desires that he had initially. And that's why we think that our support has been really focused on activating all the available resources in relation to the health system for him to be able to have cosmetic surgery. Because we created that bond with the professionals, he also expressed that in some way, at some time, he wanted to start having contact again with his son. But of course, that needed or that required a lot of previous steps to be done. For example, one is to have one stable place to live, because in Paco's situation, the fact is that he was moving from one place to another because he was a very active substance user. And we suggested to him that first he should try to untapper or coming off drugs in order to have a more stable situation in relation to his health, in relation to his finances, in order for being able to pursue this desire, this wish to contact again with the family. Now Paco is in a process where he's still using, but the use and the abuse has reduced a lot. And He's going to the visits of the mental health network on substance abuse and treatment, the public network. He also spent some time in the therapeutic community, which is the community for rehabilitation also on drugs, but this is financed privately. And now it's in a process where he has been trying to live together with some colleagues, but without using and abusing substances, which has also facilitated that when we tried to contact his son, the son, which never in his life wanted to contact his father, has said, well, maybe. And that is a huge success for Paco in multiple ways, because he has secured a place to live. He has been living independently with support. He has a stable situation in relation to his health. And he now may regain contact with the family again. And in the case of the first video, the situation is similar, but on the contrary. When Fadil started in 2019 being supported by the organization, he had nothing. He had any income, and we started doing all the instrumental things in order for him to be able to receive some pension, which now receive a non-contributory pension from the state, from the Catalan government. And with that pension, we tried to secure one place separated from his family, where he doesn't want to live. And we managed to find one place where he is being able to live, and also helping him avoiding when we detected that he had some crisis, because Fadil has a lot of psychotic crises, mainly when he uses and abuses substances. And our role was very instrumental, and I think it's very important to recognize that we try to avoid every kind of hospitalization, every kind of forced treatment, because at the end of the day, the recovery process, it's personal. And we as a support decision-making organization, we could not do it. We could not force it, but we could not also do it alone.
So sorry to cut you off, Ferran. It's been extremely interesting. We're running a little short on time, but I think the points you make about how your service enabled both individuals to avoid coercive treatment is extremely important. I wonder if you might want to hand over to your colleague, to Xavier, to speak briefly, and then we'll proceed with an interactive dialogue and questions. But thank you so much for your statement.
Thank you, Jared.
So with that said, I'll briefly hand over to Xavier Orno, who's an activist, human rights defender, a trainer at DINCAT, which is an organization in Catalonia which defends the rights of persons with disabilities, where he works with plena inclusion, evaluating and certifying the quality of services being provided. So Xavier, over to you briefly, and then we'll have a discussion and dialogue on these matters. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, gracias. La importancia de los apoyos a las personas con discapacidad radica en que si no se respetan los derechos, si no se respetan las decisiones de las personas con discapacidad, lo que estamos haciendo es quitarle la identidad a la persona, que es lo que nos hace más humanos. Si a una persona le quitas lo que son los gustos por la comida, o qué tipo de deporte quiere hacer, o ver como espectáculo de ocio, lo que hacemos es deshumanizar a la persona. Por eso es importante que existan y que las personas puedan, sobre todo con discapacidad, puedan poderse vincular a servicios que les puedan facilitar esa toma de decisiones, ya sea, por ejemplo, qué tipo de alimentación puede tener, recomendándole para tener una vida más sana, o ampliando sus hábitos alimentarios a alimentos que no conoce.
La primera parte.
Perdó, sento un soroll. Val. O, per exemple, també, por ejemplo, también la importancia de si tiene problemas de salud, que la persona, pues, recordarle la medicación que tiene que tomar o cuando tiene que ir a la farmacia a buscar la medicación. O también cuando tiene visitas médicas, muy importante para su calidad de vida y sobre todo su calidad de salud. Pero también la importancia en dónde quiere vivir o con quién quiere vivir. Y ahí también este aspecto es importante en la relación de cómo una entidad como Support puede ayudar a cómo dialogar o cómo apoyar a la persona en relación a los deseos propios de la persona respecto a los de sus familias, porque a veces los deseos de la persona y los deseos de la familia no son los mismos. Y aquí es importante cómo los apoyos puedan ayudar a fomentar esa identidad de la persona, explotar al máximo sus deseos y al final que la persona se pueda sentir realmente útil. Si la persona no puede tener esta capacidad de decisión, el sentirse esa propia identidad, puede generar que la persona puede tener ostracismo, quedarse en casa, no salir, no interactuar con su entorno, con la sociedad, con su comunidad, en el cual lo que generamos es pues una desconexión con la sociedad y todas las oportunidades que puede llegar a tener de amistades, de relaciones, de conectarse. Realmente, aquí en Cataluña lo que decimos es el arrelament. Supongo que como traducción en castellano sería el arraigo al territorio. Y también esto genera un sentimiento de pertenencia a algo, de no ser solo un extraño cuando se mira por la calle con el resto de personas, sino que forma también parte de esa comunidad. Es un igual a los otros y que también, igual que puede recibir ayuda, él también puede ayudar a las demás personas. Por eso la importancia de que la persona pueda tener los apoyos, sobre todo con anticipación. Y también, en parte, como deber, es importante también que la persona pueda anticipar también los deseos o las cosas que quiere hacer a sus apoyos, porque así también les será más fácil a los apoyos cómo organizar o cómo ayudar que la persona se pueda organizar.
Thank you so much, Xavier. That's really noteworthy. I think the point around choice and identity and independent living in the community are extremely important. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the interactive section of this panel discussion and this webinar, a chance to exchange ideas, observations on the videos about what people thought was good and positive, maybe comparing to situations in your own countries, and maybe also identifying ongoing challenges and more difficult issues as well. So firstly, I'd like to invite, if there are any panelists, for example, Michael, Njenga, if you have any observations on what we've seen, that would be very welcome, noting you are across a range of contexts, particularly in Africa. I see also some good back and forth in the chat here in Spanish. Please do continue to use that, and then we'll open up the floor for the audience at large. So please do raise hands if you would like to ask questions. So first, I'll hand over to Michael for some comments, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jared, I think, for the very interesting conversation. So just a few reflection from the Global South perspective. First, just to, for example, recognize in a context where you do not have strong social support system, then the family naturally becomes like the only form of support. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we are talking about autonomy and choice. But again, when you have not invested in comprehensive, for example, mental health services and support, then the question is, there's nothing to choose from, or there is little to choose from. So I think it is important to understand that from a Global South context. And also, I think, just to clarify, for example, in the Global South, that the issue mostly is not the law, and not to say that the law is not important. Why is it, for example, people in Nigeria or Burkina Faso in Africa cannot make their decision? Because decisions are being made for them by their families, by their relatives, irrespective of what the law says. And not to say that it is not important to amend the law. It is important to amend the law, of course, to comply, with the quality rights and international human rights best practices. But I think we must have two processes depending on context, and recognizing that, for example, in Kenya, the law alone is basically not going to address the issue of substituted decision making. You really need to work with communities. You have to work with traditional leaders. You have to work with traditional healers, and in that build their capacity to understand the paradigm shift from substituted decision making to supported decision making. So I think it's really important to understand the context. I think what I found interesting, especially in the second video, is a very a clear sense that the person has full capacity irrespective of the impairment. And I think for me, that's really important, because then that speaks into what the quality rights talk about in terms of legal capacity. You have the capacity to hold a right and the capacity to exercise.
I also can't hear Michael anymore. His connection might be lost. So I open the floor up to others in case you want to make any brief comments. And I do urge everyone to be brief if you can, so that as many people as possible can speak. So we'll have a few more minutes on the section on the videos, and then we'll move to a more open discussion. And great to see more discussion in the chat as well, which I really encourage. So feel free to raise hands, either panelists who want to speak briefly or other people. Thank you.
I guess that I want to stress, also reinforcing Xavier's message, that the right to legal capacity and developing support decision making doesn't mean anything really if we do not consider the fact that the person has the right to live independently, they have the right to access the health services, the right for not being degraded or treated in a coercive manner, the right to liberty and security, the right to form a family, and somehow support decision making is pivotal in the way that we approach or facilitate that the person has the ability or has the resources to enjoy from other rights. Yeah.
Super. That's a great summary, Ferran. Thank you so much. And thank you also for being brief. So with that excellent point, I think we'll turn over to the broader audience for any reflections, including what we've just seen. We can there's some really good points around what choice means if the services aren't available. Of course, supported decision making is tied to the right to legal capacity and the right to make choices, but there's a broader health policy and practice environment at play here. And I know the Quality Rights work does have many examples of good practices. So just to prompt some questions, perhaps people might want to give examples of either good practice or challenges from their own context, or to perhaps ask about what to do in more difficult situations. But I hand the floor over to others, and I encourage people to raise their hand and make any comment that they see fit, and allowing others space as well, so being as succinct as possible. So the first one I see Asun Aransval. So over to you.
¿Puedo preguntar? Sí, vale. Quería preguntar a Ferran. Yo trabajo en Navarra. Aquí en Navarra se siguen dictando medidas cautelares y curatelas representativas. Entonces, has hecho referencia al proceso de previo a que una persona sea apoyada por support, que es solicitándolo de manera voluntaria en el juzgado. Entonces, bueno, me pregunto si en Girona se dictan este otro tipo de medidas o qué trabajo se ha hecho y con quién para canalizar hacia la parte más asistencial y voluntaria.
Y te respondo en castellano, quizá mejor. Es cierto que la mayoría de las personas a las que apoyamos en Support Girona vienen a través de la figura del asistente por la vía judicial, pero sí que es verdad que la última reforma en Cataluña abre la vía a que la persona pueda acudir vía notarial a pedir este asistente. Quizás una de las características más distintivas de nuestro Código Civil. Y en relación a las medidas que hemos tomado para fomentar este uso o este incremento en el uso de la voluntariedad, es el hecho de que hemos hecho muchísima formación, hemos hecho muchísima sensibilización, tanto a familiares, operadores sociales, operadores jurídicos, a lo largo de los años, ¿no? Porque bueno, creemos en la asistencia como medida que se alinea con la Convención. Y además, ahora que se puede solicitar de manera extrajudicial, pues es incluso un paso más allá hacia la desjudicialización de los apoyos, ¿no? Que es un paso importante. Creo que también los Quality Rights nos han ayudado a ver pues, que existen otras maneras de prestar apoyo voluntario más allá de lo que es la propia medida formal, ¿no? Como antes mencionaban, estos mecanismos de apoyo entre iguales, experiencias del paciente experto, estos círculos de apoyo, la mentoría social. Quiero decir, el apoyo no se limita quizá a mecanismos formales vía judicial o vía notarial, sino que puede tener muchas otras formas, ¿no? Y quizá, y acabo con esto, algo que hemos hecho y que se ha apostado mucho desde Support Girona es por desarrollar un servicio de asesoramiento y guía para las familias, porque en realidad las familias y las personas que pueden necesitar este apoyo van muy perdidas, no saben bien de qué le estamos hablando cuando estamos hablando de mecanismos jurídicos. Entonces sí que desarrollamos este servicio que es gratuito para las familias, en el que se pueden asesorar y pueden, bueno, tener un contexto, una imagen más clara de lo que ofrecemos y de cómo pueden solicitar este apoyo para ellos o para un familiar o un conocido. No sé si respondo a la pregunta.
Sí, gracias.
Thank you, Ferran. And I see, building on that, a good comment in the chat here from Aidan Ritmuller about Australia, about, again, reinforcing the need for good support and options in practice, even if the law sometimes does actually provide for the possibility. So it can go both ways. I call on Fionnuala Colgan. Apologies if I've mispronounced your name.
Hi, yeah, no, Fionnuala, you did great. So Fionnuala, I'm from Ireland, and I double interest. I work with a national voluntary organisation, Mental Health Ireland, but I also teach law in TUSA and human rights. So it's just really interesting to get the international perspective. But in recent times, Ireland has enacted legislation in order to comply with the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disability. It did place the Act in 2015, but because it had to meet certain criteria of the UN Convention, the implementation of the Act was delayed. But as you'll see, like from the links I've given you, prior to the Act, people that had disability or had particular needs, they were made wards of court. With the new legislation, that's now being administered by another organisation, statutory-based Decision Support Services. But the courts hold the right to make a decision if it's an issue to do with a particular operation. So recently, there was a gentleman with dementia, and the hospital required that his leg be amputated, but they had to go to the High Court to have that adjudicated on. But the High Court made the decision that it would be far more distressful for that gentleman to wake up and find his leg gone than it was to perhaps alleviate a particular health problem. So, so that's Ireland's commitment to reaching out to people, families, and supporting the person to be able to make their own decisions. And an organisation cannot make a decision for them anymore. They have to be supported to make their own decision. And with the decision support services, a lot of training, a lot of backup, a lot of support is being given to organisations. But the decision support services have a very serious legal responsibility as well. So it's just, it's what's happened in Ireland, and perhaps it'll happen eventually throughout Europe. I think it's returning, independence to people with that may need special, and that somebody is not making the decision for them. It's no longer about the person's best interest. So I think it's wonderful. Yeah, and a seminar like this, and a webinar like this is great as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Fionnuala. That's the Irish law, I know, as you say, it was a long time coming, but is one of the leading examples, and interesting to hear about the particular practice and how it is progressively working towards a much stronger supported decision-making approach. So I don't yet see any other requests for the floor. I would encourage anyone to raise their hands if they would like to. I mean, some of the issues that can come up, I think the example Fionnuala gave is someone with dementia that can present particular challenges. I know that WHO has ongoing work on good practices in that regard. And sometimes other issues can come up when someone is in a particularly severe crisis, whether they're suicidal or some other kind of situation, but really also stressing that, as speakers have said earlier, that the essential point is the individual does have always the right to make their own decisions. As Michael put it, the identity issue and the dignity of risk. So I'm not sure if any of those questions provokes any thoughts from attendees, but welcome any questions or comments. I see Olga Kalina.
Hello, I'm from Georgia. Myself a person with a psychosocial disability, and also an activist of NGO sector, and for many years, and a trainer of quality rights. I wanted to highlight that in my country, in Georgia, we had the reform of guardianship, and from 2014, we have some supported decision-making legally, at least on paper. And this is an example of how a law can be changed, but there can still be problems with implementation. We had the transition period for 4 years, and during these 4 years, all cases were reviewed, and people got, well, supporters instead of guardians. Lots of problems with that as well. But one of the biggest issues is indeed the education of families. It's the building of choices, because if you even are going to have a law, you are not going to build these alternatives, and if you still are going to keep people in institutions, this law will be meaningless. But one positive case that we have still, it's the difference, because before a person couldn't complain and like demand anything, because legally he was under guardianship, and legally it meant that guardian says, and then the treatment is voluntary. Now there is a practical problem. The person can often not get the legal help because of the being locked in an institution. But if the person knows the contact of a lawyer and is in contact with some supporters outside, then the person can actually apply to court independently, I mean, without any guardians attached. This means a better protection of rights, but it still means that there is this need of support services. But for systems where only informal support is used while you still have legislation which is allowing for like substituted decision making, eventually, if it comes to like, court or a notarial act, the person's rights will be violated. So you essentially need both components to do something useful. And it's so great to hear from Support Girona and from Ireland that so much efforts are being done in this direction. And it's very encouraging for us as well, because we really need these practical examples of implementation, because the legislation we already have, but implementation is still lagging behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Very, very good points there, including some practical challenges for those in institutions currently accessing their legal rights. I see a question in the chat from Justina, but first we'll have Peter McGovern, and then I'll hand over to Justina, and then to, I think Ferran might want to answer one of the questions. So over to you, Peter. I
can't hear you, Peter.
Yeah, I can't hear Peter myself. So we'll jump to Justina, and then we'll come back to Peter if he's able to be heard later. So over to you, Justina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the chance to speak. I have just shortly questions based because I'm peer mental health advocacy for ethnic and minorities group in Ireland. And as person with living on experience, I have also question based on that subject. How the service decision of capacity decision support service is provided in other country, and will be provided for ethnic and minorities group, migrant people, especially for people with mental health difficulties. Currently, based on the convention EU UNCRPD, the people with mental health difficulties in Ireland are disclosed from the decision support service and capacity service. So the migrant people, because the barrier of language and the culture, find the difficulties have access to these services to be protected and supported, as you presented here, and the Act from 2015 in Ireland based on capacity is telling. So my question is how you provide the service in your country for migrant people, especially people with mental health difficulties, which is disability as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Justina. I might hand over to Ferran if he is able to answer that in his local context. I know certainly it's an important issue. The CRPD is relatively clear in terms of what should happen, but that doesn't mean that it is happening. So I'm not sure if, Ferran, that was one that you wanted to take.
Solo reaccionar a dos cuestiones, una de Michael y otra de Olga en relación a las familias. Hace falta muchísima formación y sensibilización a las familias. Muchas de ellas esperan soluciones rápidas, han vivido situaciones en las que los familiares quizá han sido una carga para ellos y esperan de los servicios que reaccionemos rápidamente y muy a menudo al contrario a los derechos humanos de la persona. Muchas veces nos piden como servicio que institucionalicemos a las personas. Y eso es algo a lo que somos contrarios, porque el derecho de la persona es de vivir de manera independiente con el apoyo para que tome sus propias decisiones. Eso crea muchos conflictos en relación con las familias que tienen una expectativa de lo que es el apoyo a la toma de decisiones como servicio que no se está cumpliendo. Entonces, quizá es cultural, quizá hace falta muchísima formación. Creo que Quality Rights nos puede ayudar muchísimo en ese aspecto. Y también es natural, como decía Michael, que las familias sean la primera vía de apoyo para la persona cuando no existen estos servicios, de la manera que quizá en Europa tenemos desarrollados a nivel de estructura de servicios sociales. Precisamente por eso hace falta mucha más formación y sensibilización hacia las familias. Y en relación a una de las cuestiones que salía en el chat, Kisha comentaba cómo gestionar el apoyo a la toma de decisiones en situaciones en las que la persona ha vivido intentos de suicidio. Dos ejemplos. Uno que hemos vivido personalmente en Support Girona. Uno de ellos es una señora con discapacidad intelectual a la que se le muere la abuela y en la que, bueno, a través de este hecho protagoniza diferentes intentos de, en este caso, tirarse por un puente. Claro, en el momento, la reacción natural, independiente de si la persona tiene o no tiene discapacidad o cualquier tipo de diagnóstico, es evitar el mal inmediato hacia esa persona. Por lo tanto, aquí entran en juego muchos otros factores, ¿no? Como pueden ser la intervención de los bomberos, etcétera, etcétera. Y entonces, cuando pasa este momento de intensidad, es cuando se puede hablar de por qué hemos llegado a esa situación y cómo podemos ofrecer un mejor apoyo a las personas. Y otro caso también de suicidio un tanto diferente. Recientemente hemos apoyado a una persona que con una grave discapacidad, con una grave enfermedad crónica, en la que, bueno, ella misma fue la que solicitó que se le aplicara la eutanasia. La eutanasia está regulada en España desde hace un par de años y el apoyo de nuestra organización ha consistido en, evidentemente, instrumental, acompañarla a las visitas del tribunal médico, acompañarla a que entendiera bien qué suponía esa decisión y acompañarla en los últimos momentos de la vida. Así que, un poco como decía, ¿no? El apoyo a la toma de decisiones no tiene sentido si no consideramos lo que realmente la persona quiere en ese momento, cuál es la voluntad. En el primer caso, seguramente sería, bueno, que la acompañáramos en el duelo de ese familiar que acababa de perder, y en el segundo caso, un poco más complejo, el hecho de que la persona quería terminar con su propia vida. Así que, bueno, casuísticas muy diversas que nos hacen tener que estar muy atentos y muy formados hacia cómo proveer este tipo de apoyo.
Thank you, Ferran. Some really, interesting and important cases, examples showing that supported decision-making is appropriate even in what can be considered hard cases. It's not just, the simple matters we're dealing at the very difficult end and spectrum of human diversity, of course. I see Peter McGovern, if you'd like to try again with your question, Peter.
Yeah, I'll try one more time. You hear me now? Yep, well, great, perfect. My name is Peter. I'm a psychiatrist based in Norway, and I've been a bit involved in quality rights over the years as well. I just want to make a very quick, kind of simple point from from a kind of clinician perspective as well. I think the webinar today has been wonderful. And we've heard lots about how supported decision making and advanced planning is the only way really to support people's right to decide for themselves and to uphold their human rights. I think there's an added benefit here that I think supported decision making, advanced planning is also a really radical and exciting clinical tool that I think that can lead to and provide better healthcare for people. I think it can help that they know that the interventions they're coming with are in line with a person's will and preference, and therefore hopefully will have a better impact. And I think that's an important tool that we desperately need in a system that's looking for new ideas and new ways forward to help people. So I think there's a double win here.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's really important to have that perspective, and I mean, I certainly felt that personally as a user and a survivor of institutionalization. It did seem rather to discourage seeking mental health services in the future if one knows that the response might be coercive. I see a question in the chat here from Judith Abaca about the context in Navarro in Spain. I guess it shows there that while Catalonia might have made some positive advances, the situation is not universally so across the broader Spanish context. So I think that is a good reminder that even within one country there can be quite a large variation, and that there is a big gap between human rights standards and practice to be followed. So I want to recognize that important comment and question. So we have sort of 7 more minutes or so. If anyone has any other comment or question they might like to make. I don't know if Michael Njenga, if you're back, and I see you've made a few comments in the chat. If you might want to comment on some of the questions that we've heard so far, then please, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gerald. Maybe just a few reflection. I think for me, the most important thing, even in terms of transforming the law, is practice. I think that's really, really important because, for example, in Africa, it's not like government don't want to adopt the paradigm shift, but the problem is that they do not know how. So you're telling them, we want to end coercion, we want to end this, but then sometimes you don't show them how to do that. Yes, we have the tools, but then how do we transform the generalities of the law, into practice? I think that for me is really, really important. I think the second thing is just to think about the role of people with psychosocial disabilities in all these. I think that is really, really important. Their meaningful participation and engagement in this particular process, I think it's really, really critical. I know WHO have documented quite a number of good practices. And every time I go to different countries in Africa, I'll see people who are doing innovative ideas around, supported decision-making. And I think that's important, that we continuously continue to build knowledge and respond to, the most maybe difficult and contentious issues. I think my last point, I think we have made, of course, with the leadership of WHO, tremendous progress. Sometimes I only feel that we focus on the difficult situation other than looking at how much we have come in terms of the paradigm shift. We might not be able to solve everything now in the next 5 or 10 years, but I really want to appreciate the efforts by different colleagues in terms of where we are in the paradigm shift from substituted decision-making to supported decision-making. And I think, in conclusion, I think it is important to make law, but from a human right-based approach, for me, a law means nothing. It doesn't matter how good it is if the government do not allocate the necessary resources for the implementation of that particular law. And I think that's fundamentally a problem we see across different jurisdictions, that very good laws, but no money to implement those particular laws. So I think that's something, even as we advocate for good laws, we need to tell governments that you need to provide the relevant resources to be able to actualize and to be able to support this kind of program. Thank you, Gerald. Over back to you.
Thank you, Michael. Some really important reflections there. So I've 3 speakers left on my list. 1 question and then 2 from the panelists. So firstly, Feline, and then Magda, and then Xavier. So over to you, Feline.
Hi, I'm Feline from the Philippines. And I actually have bipolar disorder, and I'm also a doctor. And then I also work in the health policy and development space. And then still have this network and all these opportunities, I still am having a hard time like participating in the policy space and mental health. I was wondering if you could, as someone who has lived experience and as someone who has, been somewhat has had like that experience of quality and safety and actually my rights being listened to, could you suggest any ways in which we could, participate even or engage with, who decides things? Because I feel like, I had a manic episode like earlier this year. Then I was looking for a cognitive behavioral therapist. And then it took me from February to April to actually find someone. And then, I ended up, seeing 4 different therapists because I took advantage of all the schedules because it's so hard to find someone. So would you have any suggestions on, trying to make the space, because I'm already privileged as it is. How about all the other people who don't have the sort of access that I have to people and I'm grateful to have this space where we could talk about the experiences of other countries, but is there any way in which, participation is being institutionalized? Yeah, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Feline. I can briefly talk about in the context of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the International Human Rights Framework. It does build in a kind of accountability process with reviews of states, parties, including the Philippines, and from my own perspective, organizations of persons with disabilities, and in particular, organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities can be a way of organizing and ensuring that participation rights under Article 4.3 are ensured. Of course, that in itself requires a lot of work and structure building, but happy to be in contact more with you bilaterally on that. So I'll hand over to Magda and then Xavier. We have a couple of minutes left, so just quick responses from you, and then I'll hand over to Natalie to wrap up. Thank you so much. Over to you, Magda.
Bueno, solo decir que desde Cataluña lo que hemos hecho es ir a hablar con la comisionada de salud mental del Estado español. Han creado desde el gobierno una comisionada en salud mental y por tanto nos hemos puesto a su disposición para que todo lo que estamos haciendo nosotros a través de los Quality Rights se haga en toda España y por tanto ayudarles a hacer esta despliego, como si dijéramos, de todos los Quality Rights. Es referido a la pregunta de que en España no todo el mundo hace lo mismo. Bueno, pues le hemos preguntado, la comisionada ha estado muy interesada en poder hacer lo mismo que estamos haciendo en Cataluña en todas las otras comunidades autónomas.
Thank you, Magda. Over to you, Xavier.
Gracias. Una parte que quizás he obviado de cuando he hablado es también de parte de la asistencia de los apoyos para la toma de decisiones de las personas, es que el derecho a la toma de decisiones es un derecho también interconectado con otros derechos, como por ejemplo la accesibilidad, y que también es trampolín para que se puedan cumplir otros derechos. Aquí es importante entender que cuando hablamos de la accesibilidad, no es solo el pensar en un ascensor o en una rampa, sino que también a la ayuda, a la toma de decisiones, es importante que también la accesibilidad existen otras barreras, como es las barreras conductuales, en el cual la persona puede desconocer o no comprender los roles sociales o actitudes o acciones de su entorno. Y aquí es importante la parte del rol del apoyo en el cual le pueda explicar esta relación con el entorno, ya sea con la sociedad en sí o con la misma administración cuando hay un requerimiento.
Thank you so much, Xavier. And I want to acknowledge the rich discussion in the chat, some important questions about police involvement and the role in which the police have in coercion and how this needs to be eliminated. I also want to recognize, of course, the diversity of practices across Spain. I wasn't trying to capture the full richness of it, which isn't my speciality. This concludes the question and answer section. I want to briefly hand over to Natalie, but just to say that I think it's been a very good discussion. We've highlighted both the legal standards, but also the practical realities and how supported decision-making can be done, it must be done, and how it does both respect diversity and put choice in the hands of the individual to make their own decisions over their health and lives. And as I think Michael said, a lot of good progress has been made in recent years, even if there is still some way to go in many parts of the world. The direction things are heading in is indeed positive, and that's in no small part thanks to the fantastic work of the World Health Organization and the QualityRights team led by Dr. Michelle Funk. So with that said, I want to express appreciation for everyone who has attended and participated and engaged in the chat and in questions, and hand over to Natalie Drew. So over to you, Natalie.
Thanks very much. So first, I want to express our sincere gratitude to you, Jared, for doing such a great job in facilitating the webinar. Let me also thank Magda, Michael, Ferran, Xavier for all your really invaluable contributions to the discussions today and the topic as a whole. A big thank you to the colleagues again from SOM Salut Mental 360 for all their support in organizing the logistics of this webinar, and in particular, Monica for answering all of my emails and questions over the last few weeks. A big thank you also to the interpreters for their hard work during the webinar. We know it's not easy and it's a very complex area to be interpreting in. And finally, of course, thank you to all of you for joining us here today. Really, your questions, your comments have been really interesting and really contributed to the richness of the discussions. It's been a really, truly fascinating webinar today. Just before closing, a reminder to explore the resources that we've shared in the chat. Francesca has just put them back in the chat, so do go ahead and copy paste them so that you have them. I'd also encourage you to do the QualityRights e-training, which is in the chat as well, and that covers many of the issues that we've discussed today, and it will provide an opportunity for you to deepen your understanding of the whole area of supported decision making. So strongly recommending you do the e-training. We'll be breaking from these webinars for the next few months, and we'll start them again after the summer, where we'll be planning to explore more issues and aspects of ending coercive practices in services. So we'll be looking at advanced planning. We'll be looking at, how do you create a crisis response team, how to set up sensory and comfort rooms, and so on. So do look out for these notifications about this when closer to the time, which we'll be issuing closer to the time. But in the meantime, thank you once again for your engagement, your participation in these webinars, and we really look forward to reconnecting with you all in the next few weeks. So thank you very much and goodbye.